K-12 subcommittee started. Let's take roll.
Senator Craig. Here. Senator Pekarsky. Here. Senator Peake.
Here.
Senator Locke. Present. Senator Van Valkenburg.
Present.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. All right, so our first order of business is going to be to pass two bills by for the day, and we'll take them up next week, and that is Senate Bill 37 and Senate Bill 68. Can I get a motion for that?
So moved. 37, 68.
All right, I heard a motion in a second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, those bills are by for the day.
552.
Oh, it's 552. All right, we'll also take by 552 for the day. So if I can get a motion on that one.
Moved. So
So I heard a motion and a second to take by bill 552. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we got that. Do you want to go first? Okay. So we are going to start with Senator Locke because I know she has to go other places, and so Senator Locke has SB 54. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm going to do it from here, if you don't mind. And I have a substitute, so I'd like to move adoption of the substitute for Senate Bill 54.
second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, substitute is before us.
Okay. Senate Bill 54, since I filed it, there's some additional work that's been done with early childhood stakeholders to revise the original draft. This bill addresses an issue I've worked on for decades, ensuring that children and families have access to quality, affordable early childhood care and education. We know that access to quality child care supports school-ready children, setting them up for lifelong success, and it ensures that parents can go to work to support their families and their own self-sufficiency. Finally, a strong child care system generates millions of dollars in cost savings and economic benefits. Virginia has come a long way in building a unified, equitable early child and education system. SB 54 continues that good work by establishing a transparent, predictable formula for funding early childhood slots based on parent demand and a non-reverting fund to enable rollover of unspent funds to serve more children based on family demand and preference. The bill also recognizes Virginia's innovative child care teacher incentive program, recognized B5, designed to address the current teacher turnover and shortage crisis. I hope you will recommend SB 54 to stabilize and strengthen our child care system so Virginia's children, families, communities, and economy can thrive. With me today is Kathy Glazer of the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation, who collaborated with me on this bill and can provide greater detail or answer additional questions. And there are others who are here in support of SB 54.
All right, if you're here to support the bill, we'll go ahead and get in line, start with Ms. Glazer, and let's put 10 minutes on the clock. And whenever you're ready, take it away.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, really appreciate the chance to speak with you. As Senator Locke mentioned, I'm Kathy Glazer with the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation, here to speak in strong support of SB 54. This bill addresses three key components needed to assist and hold Virginia accountable for planning and addressing the increasing need and demand for available, affordable, and high-quality early childhood care and education services for Virginia's families. First, establish a formula for projecting and funding early childhood slots based on parent demand and choice. This would require the Department of Education to set and maintain a projection formula for early childhood slots and services for children under kindergarten age. This component is not unlike the current interest in updating or refining Virginia's funding formula for the K-12 system to be more accurate, precise, and appropriately resourced. Second is the non-reverting fund to enable rollover and safeguarding of appropriated but unspent funding intended for early childhood services so that Virginia's system can serve additional children based on family demand in future years. This would preserve funds legislatively intended to support child care services, such as for VPI, where every year a significant amount remains unspent. And third, because we must ensure a talented pipeline of dedicated early educators for these classrooms, the bill would institute formal recognition for Virginia's innovative child care teacher incentive program, recognized B5. Altogether, these systemic improvements would bolster Virginia's growing capabilities and prominence across states for our transparency, accountability, and precision in planning for and sustaining Virginia's public-private choice system of early education services. The Early Childhood Foundation strongly supports it and appreciates Senator Locke's vision and leadership. Thank you.
Hi, Senators. My name is Unique Luna. I live in Petersburg, Virginia, and I have two children, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I'm standing today in support of Senate Bill 54. Access to quality childcare is critical to supporting children, families, and the economy. High-quality early childcare and education programs allow parents to work and support their families while ensuring children are learning fundamental skills that they need to succeed in kindergarten and beyond. However, families across Virginia struggle to find quality, affordable childcare options that fit their needs and preferences. And I'm here to speak on my personal experience. When I started my job in May of 2021, my son was 5 months old, and I started looking for childcare then at that time, and we were on a wait list. He was 5 months old, and he didn't find childcare until the childcare we would want until he was 2 years old. So it was over a year, and we were on many wait lists. Some of them we had to pay fees. And we even looked into having a nanny set up through nannylane.com. We were doing everything we can, messaging people on Facebook. And we live in Petersburg. A lot of people honestly didn't want to come to Petersburg, but that all played a role in us having difficulty finding care. And when we did find one, was through a church daycare. We had to wait till he was 10 months old to start there. In the meantime, till we can find one that actually focuses on his educational skills, because the first 3 years of a child is fundamental when it comes to their learning abilities, and we wanted to make sure our children are prepared. So again, my daughter once I found out I was pregnant with her, we put her on the wait list for the school my son goes to now. And she is still on the wait list. She is at the current church daycare that my son started at. So I'm assuming she'll be 2 when she can start there as well. So again, that's going to be over 2 years we've been waiting to have her start at a child care preschool that actually focuses on education. Thank you for your time.
If everybody else that comes up could just try to keep it as short as possible, just so everybody can get a comment in. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Jessica Kuyala, and I live in Fredericksburg, Virginia. My husband and I have 3 children, ages 5, 7, and 9. I'm standing today in support of Senate Bill 54. This bill is important to all families in our Commonwealth. Quality child care is critical to supporting families, our communities, and the economy. My family lives in a community with very limited child care options. With few available in our area, I've had to quit my job so that my school-age children are cared for a way that encourages their growth and development after school. While there are programs available to our now 5-year-old, the wait lists are long and the cost greatly outweighs any salary that I could bring to my family. When I was working at a financial institution, my salary purely went to daycare. This bill that Senator Locke has championed would secure predictable funding to stabilize and strengthen Virginia's early education for childcare and education system. As parents, we need to know in advance that returning to the workforce won't be interrupted by lack of funding or services being shut down because there are not enough teachers. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you about establishing a stable, non-reverting child care fund that ensures parents have a choice in their child care needs.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Emily Webb with the Virginia Chamber of Commerce. Access to quality, affordable childcare is essential to Virginia's current and future workforce and the businesses that employ them. The Chamber is pleased to be a founding member of the Virginia Business Roundtable for Early Education. As Senator Locke mentioned, we know that greater access to early childhood care and education leads to higher rates of employment, and creating and maintaining a funding formula for publicly funded early child care providers will allow for more predictable, sustainable funding, which will benefit families, providers, and our economy. We ask that you support the bill.
Members of the committee, Allison Gilbreth, Voices for Virginia's Children. We support this bill. I just wanted to give you some numbers. I have 2 young children, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. When they were 1 and 3, I paid $30,000 in child care. That was for me to sustain my career, and it shouldn't have been a choice I had to make. In this past year, I just did my tally because I'm about to do my taxes. My 4-year-old was thankfully in Virginia Preschool Initiative, but my child care bill for my 2-year-old was $18,500 for this past year. So again, I ask you to support this bill.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, Jonathan Ward, representing HII and Newport News Shipbuilding, and as a member of the Virginia Business Roundtable on Early Education, and as Virginia's largest industrial employer, we're pleased to support the bill and thank the patron for patroning it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I'm going to be very brief. I'm Emily O'Brien, and on behalf of the Virginia Business Roundtable for Early Education, we strongly support this legislation and thank Senator Locke for bringing it.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Randy Pearson with 2 Capitals Consulting on behalf of Virginia Promise in Action, as well as the Roanoke Chamber of Commerce. We strongly support the bill and thank Senator Locke for bringing it forward.
Hi, Josette Bolova with the Virginia Municipal League. We also support this bill and thank the patron for bringing it forward.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Jeremy Bennett, representing the Virginia Association of Counties, VACO. We also support the legislation. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm John Easter with Chamber RVA, the regional chamber for the Richmond area. As you've heard, business recognizes the value of early childhood care, and we strongly support this bill, and thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have 1 minute and 50 seconds. No, okay. Shane Riddle, thank you. Shane Riddle, Director of Government Relations for the Virginia Education Association. We support this bill, of course. Our board supports the bill, especially the establishment of the Recognized B5 program. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody here who would like to speak against the bill?
My name's Ann Tatus, and I'm an education policy and child protection specialist. And I'm speaking against this bill because what I have in front of me is from the DFS and CPS, our system, and as we've dropped what the requirements to become educators, and that includes preschool, we have had, in the last 10 years, an extreme rise in reports to CPS, and I know that you've watched the news, of teachers, especially in the new Head Start and especially in early childhood, that are abusing children. And until we do something to make sure that our children are not raped or beaten in schools, and that's especially in Newport News, Portsmouth, Virginia Beach, it's across the entire state. Every week there's another report of a child, another division covering up another child who has been beaten by either their special education, their pre-K, or especially the rapes that are going on rampantly across this state. I wrote 14-page legislation to close loopholes on this. I contacted Favola, Republicans, everybody. Nobody wants to protect these children. Until you can protect them, and dropping what it takes to be a teacher is not the answer to do that. Until you can protect them, you do not need to bring any more children into the public education system.
Is there any questions or comments from members of the committee?
I'm waiting to speak.
Oh.
I signed up.
Senator Peake.
Doesn't show up on the big wheel, does it?
Doesn't.
Mr. Chairman, I just had a question or two for the patron.
1 or 2.
1 or 2. We'll see where it goes. I've not said final question yet.
Okay, Senator Peake.
Senator Locke, do we have an idea of how much initial funding will be put in this, or where it's coming from? Is this all in relation to what was in the budget that, I can't remember the figure, 239 and 149 for early childhood education? Do we have any numbers?
Well, we know that the federal funding that came as a consequence of the pandemic is no longer going to be there, so there will be a need for a significant amount of money to go into the funding of the early childhood care. But I would ask Kathy to come up, and because of the ongoing work that was done over the summer, there were some recommendations for how much would be needed.
I would say for the bill itself, for the three components, I would not expect that there would be any cost to the funding formula, to developing and sort of sustaining the funding formula. It would, of course, indicate what appropriation is needed for future years, but developing the funding formula as well as setting up the non-reverting fund, that's a way to try to capture unspent dollars that could be used then to cover the cost of the services. Recognize B5 to sustain it at the rate that it's currently being provided would probably require some additional funds.
These centers will be held to the utmost standards for the protection of the children and all qualification standards required in the Commonwealth. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, if there's no more questions or comments, committee moves on motions.
I move report that we report and we refer to Finance Senate Bill 54.
All right,
I recommend for reporting to the full committee.
With substitute. All right, there's been a motion to recommend to report the substitute to Senate Bill 54. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right, that motion passes 5-0. Senate Bill 54 is over. All right. Thank you, Senator Locke. All right, next up. Senator Hashmi, we have Senate Bill 235.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. SB 235 seeks to amend Section 22.2, 18.8 of the Code of Virginia, which was adopted in 2022. You may recall that that particular legislation was carried by then Senator Donovan, and it directed the Department of Education to adopt model policies that each school board would then adopt policies as outlined by the Department of Education, and each school board could adopt policies either consistent with or even more comprehensive than those model policies, and these policies would ensure parental notification of instructional material that includes sexually explicit content. Now, that bill, as it passed out of the two chambers that year and as it was signed into law, included a fourth enactment clause that provided that the provisions of this act shall not be construed as requiring or providing for the censoring of books in public elementary and secondary schools. And while this enactment clause appears in our Acts of Assembly and in the hard copy of the code, it does not appear in the online version, and therefore it really has not been part of the ways in which this policy has been enacted. And instead of giving parents a choice regarding the books that or the materials that their children may or may not read, some school divisions have actually used the statute as a basis to remove books entirely from the school. Some school divisions have established procedures. Now, most school divisions have already established procedures for challenging and removing books from their schools, and those policies should be followed rather than misusing this parental consent statute as the basis for such decisions. So one thing we want to make clear is that parental notification and parental consent does not equal the granting of some to the right to remove books completely from the school or from classroom libraries. Now, the original patron of this bill, said that that was her intent, but the way in which this bill, the legislation, has now been carried out in many school divisions is quite the opposite. So we have some school divisions, for example, that has cited this 2022 parental consent law as a basis for actually removing 30 books from its schools rather than following its own established challenge procedures. Another locality has also cited this law as one basis for its school library and media center policies that include a requirement that no materials that contain sexually explicit content should be acquired for a school or classroom library. So these actions taken by these localities have absolutely nothing to do with parental consent. They are clear acts of censorship. So this prohibition on using the parental consent statute for purposes of censorship makes it clear that the removal of books from schools is not the purpose of the law that was passed in 2022. And this legislation seeks to reinstate that critical clause at the end, and that begins in line 24, that, however, nothing in this section or any model policy or amendments thereto adopted by the department pursuant to subsection B or any policy or amendments thereto adopted by a school board pursuant to this subsection shall be construed as permitting the censoring of books in any public elementary or secondary school. This bill, this legislation is strongly supported by our Virginia Library Association, and I know that we have some individuals here who would like to speak to the legislation.
Yeah, why don't we can take testimony and then we'll get to the committee. So why don't we have the folks who support the bill come up first, and we'll do 10 minutes.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. I am Lisa Varga, Executive Director of the Virginia Library Association. The members of VLA greatly support Senator Hashmi introducing SB 235, which we strongly support. As Senator Hashmi has noted, the original 2022 legislation contained an enactment clause providing this parental consent statute should not be construed as authorizing censorship. Rather than giving parents the right to consent to their child having access to sexually explicit instructional material in the classroom or to request alternative non-explicit instructional material, some school divisions have simply used this statute as basis for removing materials from the school. This is a clear violation of the statute's prohibition on censorship. Such actions ignore and bypass established challenge procedures for the removal of instructional materials from the classroom and school libraries. Enactment clauses do not appear in the online version of the code and can be easily overlooked in the hard copy version. Moving the prohibition on censorship into the body of the statute as proposed in SB 235 will make it clear the statute is about parental consent and not the removal of books from schools. This is a very simple change and does not alter in any way the substance of the current law. The members of the Virginia Library Association urge you to approve SB 235. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon. My name is Judy Dykeman. I am a past president of Virginia Association of School Librarians, and I am speaking on behalf of the organization today in support of SB 235. The language added in regards to the censoring of books is a much-needed addition to the Code of Virginia that was enacted last year. I know that several districts in the state have censored library and school selections under the previous verbiage, whether intentional or not, while trying to abide by the law. Dr. Coons last June issued a state superintendent memo trying to clarify the issue between library materials and instructional materials also. Virginia Association of School Librarians always stands on the side of free access to books by our students and the students' right to choose a selection to read, and against any type of censorship or banning of book selections. We also firmly believe that parents and guardians should have the right to discuss and choose reading selections for their own children. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the subcommittee. My name is Brianna Diaz, and I represent the ACLU of Virginia, and we support SB 235. SB 235 seeks to resolve one of the issues created with the enactment of SB 66, the law establishing the model policies on sexually explicit content. While SB 66 contained an enactment clause, some school districts or their district superintendents have misapplied the law, using it to target books deemed sexually explicit and ban them. The automatic removal of challenged books from circulation, preventing any student's access, is censorship that contradicts the law's express limitations. The law, both in the words of its proponents and by its plain terms, is designed to expand parental choice about what material their students access, not to ensure that a small group of parents can place books beyond the reach of any student. SB 235 will correct this wrong and provide school boards the clarity they need. It is for these reasons we ask you to support the bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Narissa Rahman, here on behalf of Equality Virginia. We support the bill for the reasons outlined by our partners.
Good afternoon, Mike Carabinos. I've been a parent, kind of on the front line of a lot of these conversations throughout this last few years regarding challenges to books. And I'll say the same thing, the spirit of this proposal and the spirit that I try to push forward is, as a parent, you might have the right, absolutely, to decide what your child can read. You do not have the right to decide what my child can read. These laws, these bills, and these efforts have consistently been used to try to limit what my child has access to within the schools. That has to stop. This is the first step. This should not be the only step. These books need protection. We need to remember that the people banning books have never been the good guys throughout history. And removing a book from a school is a ban, and it is censorship, and we should oppose it just on principle alone. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, Mr. Chairman, we're not in full committee on the, sorry. Yeah. Shane Riddle with Virginia Education Association. We appreciate the patron bringing this language to clarify. But I want to also qualify the statement of support by saying that, of course, we believe books should be age appropriate. And the speaker that was just before me, parents do have that right? To opt their kids out of that. Of course, we believe that books should be age appropriate, and we know that divisions are following these policies, right? But just to give you an example, many school boards in this Commonwealth have banned books like To Kill a Mockingbird, banned books like Huckleberry Finn. And I would urge everyone here today and even online that are watching that the play To Kill a Mockingbird is coming to Richmond. It's going to be at the Altria at the end of February. I bought a ticket. I'm going to see that. The first time I saw the play was at the Ford Theater in D.C. And the book is wonderful. The author, Harper Lee, is wonderful. It's a great, great novel that we should all read. So we support this bill, and we thank you, Senator Hashmi, for sponsoring it. Thank you.
Shane, maybe I'll see you there. Those that are in opposition, come on up and speak.
Again, Ann Tatus. And to follow up with his point is that the books that we're talking about, nobody's talking about Maya Angelou. We're not talking about To Kill a Mockingbird. This book here, let's talk about it. And if there's any minors in the room or watching online, I ask you to leave. And please don't try to Tim Anderson me, because I'm going to read this book to you. Is that we're talking about books that talk about fingering buttholes, anal butt plugs. This is Chesterfield County, with images, if you can see that, okay? It talks about if you're not into sex, go online and you can find access to kink if you're into hanging people from ceilings. This is what we're talking about, okay? And to her point is that you've always been able to challenge books and have them removed. It's actually 2 or 3 different Virginia codes. That's not new. If school divisions are inappropriately citing this, then that's the conversation that needs to be had. But this is nothing but an effort to continue to keep books like these, and they are numerous. In Chesterfield County, having 35 picture transgender books for kindergartners, that's what we're talking about, is that then they block, some principals will be like, just notify me of what my kid checks out, right? It's common sense. No, child rights. No, I'm sorry, parental rights. That's what we're doing, that's why we can't even come to an agreement here, is because they want to keep books like these in our schools. And so we're not talking about To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm not talking about Huckleberry Finn. I'm talking about blatant graphic sexual pornography that is destroying the prefrontal cortex of children who will never be the same afterward, is what we're talking about.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Todd Gackey on behalf of the Family Foundation. We were here for the debate when the bill first passed, and the intent was to make sure the parents had a right to opt their child out of any curriculum that was being taught in the classroom that contained sexually explicit material. Now, it's not uncommon for material to also be brought in from the library and to be used for teaching and instruction. And so we also know that school boards have a broad latitude in terms of making sure that what is in their school libraries is age appropriate. And I want to direct you to the attention of a case out of Missouri, CKW versus Winsville, in which the judge opined this: the district's policy does not ban the district's students from reading the books at issue here, nor does it ban students from acquiring the books or lending the books to others. Students may borrow the books from the public library or from a friend or neighbor. They likewise are free to purchase the books. The policy does not even ban the students from bringing the books to the district schools and then sharing them with their friends. The judge went on to say the school district does not ban a book when, through its authorized school board, it decides not to continue possessing a book on its own library bookshelves. They have the authority to determine what's on their library bookshelves. This bill really is unnecessary, creates confusion, and it sends the message that sexually explicit material and pornographic material is okay for school libraries.
Senator Peake.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for the patron. Is censor or censoring defined anywhere in the code?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just briefly address, it probably is, and I think council can point to that, but in this section of the code, if I could just address what was previously said, it might answer your question. Okay. So the previous speaker pointed to a case in Missouri. So one thing I want to make clear is that this legislation has nothing to do with public libraries. We're only talking about schools, and in fact, we're only talking about the issue of parental notification. So the language that was passed in 2022 regarding parental notification stays entirely intact. So if you're looking at the legislation, there is not any change to what we passed in 2022, and it clearly spells out that this is ensuring parental notification. It is directly identifying the specific instructional material and sexually explicit subjects. And 3, it is permitting the parent of any student to review instructional material that includes. That is the original language that we passed in 2022. Nothing has changed. And in fact, what we're doing is restoring the enactment clause that was also passed in 2022, restoring the enactment clause without any change so that it appears fully in our online materials, online Virginia code, and so that everybody has a clear understanding that nothing in this section, any model policy or amendments thereto adopted by the department are going to be construed to permit the censoring of books in any public, elementary, or secondary school. That was the enactment clause in 2022. I believe, Senator, you voted yes to that bill, that legislation in 2022. This is simply taking it out of the enactment clause and putting it directly into the legislation. So that is the only change that we're doing, taking that same language and now putting it directly into the bill itself.
Mr. Chair, and So reading the last two lines, shall be construed to permit the censoring. And that's my question. Who determines whether or not they're censoring?
Well, Mr. Chair and Senator Peake, the same language is what the language you voted on in the 2022 bill, and maybe council can answer your original question about the definition of censorship in our Virginia code.
Mr. Chairman?
Maybe before I come to you, let me add to that too, which is to say that every locality has a process by which they can remove books, and what some localities are doing is taking this code section and using it as a way to get around that process to ban books in bulk. So, for example, you had a locality in the capital region that used this code section to take around 75 books out of the libraries. There are many reasons why you want to have conversations about different books, and every locality has that policy for how to do that and what the particular process is. So I think that goes a little bit to your question about who's defining what's censoring, right? Which is to say that I think localities using this code section as a way to go around the ordinary process that involves stakeholders is I think, part of the answer. Maybe not, maybe. But.
Mr. Chairman, it
Yep.
seems that localities have been using this section, and y'all don't like the way they've been doing it. So now you're trying to change it and say that it's censoring because they've been removing books that are sexually explicit from elementary schools or wherever, certain localities. Now this bill, it looks like it wants to call it censoring and then prevent them from doing that. And so that's my whole point. And to take it back to the other gentleman who spoke earlier, Mr. Chairman, there are certain books that are racially offensive that are no longer carried in our school libraries. Is that censoring, or is that just removing books that are offensive to students? And based on this language, who gets to decide?
Mr. Chairman, if I could reiterate the point that you made, and I just want to reiterate and clarify it. We're talking about two entirely different things, Senator Peake. There is the parental notification, parental consent, and that is what this section of the code sought to do in 2022, and it passed out of both chambers and was signed into law. So we're talking about parental consent, parental notification. Now, the idea of assessing what books or materials should be included or not included in a school library or a school classroom library, that is a different process entirely. And school boards have processes in place where materials may be challenged. So challenging material versus notifying parents are two entirely different things. This section of the code seeks to address the issue of parental notification. The only thing this bill is doing is taking the enactment clause that was originally passed and restoring it to the full legislation so it's quite clear what parental notification means.
Senator Pekarsky.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to report this to full committee, and I'll second it with Senator Locke's proxy.
All right, there's been a motion and there has been a second to recommend reporting Senate Bill 235. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? No. All right.
Ayes 3, noes 2.
That motion passes 3-2.
Thank you.
Senator. Senator Steff, you're up next. Senator Steff, you have
Senate Bill 558, Mr. Chair.
All right, take it away, Senator.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill 588 would amend the Code of Virginia to introduce a school choice educational savings account under Article 2, Section 1. This legislation provides parents with financial means to support their child's education through various qualifying expenses. These expenses encompass a broad range of educational needs, including tuition, tutoring services, textbooks, technology devices, and fees associated with educational advancement. Enhance education access and ability. the ESAs provide increased education access, especially to students with disabilities, homeless children, foster children, and dependents of military personnel. This initiative addresses educational equity by giving these groups more opportunities and resources for their education. Parents are empowered to choose the most suitable educational setting for their children, whether it be private schools, online learning programs, or specialized tutoring services. The flexibility allows for a more tailored educational experience that caters to the individual needs of the student. The legislation recognizes and supports a wide range of educational expenses, including those for special education, therapies. The comprehensive approach ensures that all aspects of child's education, including their specific learning needs, are adequately funded. By providing the means for parents to select a variety of educational options, the legislation encourages schools to maintain a high standard and innovate to attract and retain students. The ESA model promotes efficient use of public funds by allocating them directly to the parents, who can then decide the most efficient way to spend these resources on their children's education. While there are concerns about potential challenges, such as the impact on public school funding and ensuring accountability, these can be addressed through ensuring accountability. The legislation mandates regular audits and quarterly expense summaries, fostering transparency and responsible use of the funds, balancing public school support. While ESAs redirect funds, they create an environment where public schools are incentivized to improve and compete, benefiting in the overall quality of education for the student and the state. In conclusion, the school choice educational savings account legislation in Virginia represents a significant step towards empowering parents and ensuring that all children have access to education that best suits their individual needs. By providing financial support and flexibility, the legislation acknowledges the diverse educational landscape of the 21st century and positions Virginia as a leader in innovative educational policy. The legislation promises not only to enhance the educational experience of individual students, but also to elevate the educational standard of education, all education within the Commonwealth for all students. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sure we have speakers possibly against, but possibly in support as well.
We take those before we open it up to the committee. So why don't we have, if there's anybody here who wants to support the bill, why don't you guys come up first?
Hello, I'm Kim Mayo from Virginia Beach. I'm an independent voter. I ask you all to support this bill. Most Americans support school choice regardless of political persuasions. I am the product of school choice in another state. We grew up in a small town and attended a top-ranked regional school at no charge that helped us grow and thrive academically, socially, and athletically. My sister also greatly benefited from school choice and then earned a full scholarship to private school and one to college to play field hockey. I attended college in Hampton Roads, and I'm now a parent. In Virginia Beach, we are having a very tough school year with our second grader. We have a top standalone school called Old Donation, but she was denied entry despite being qualified. We're now stuck with an elementary school that has not been providing the agreed-upon services. I tried to get an out-of-zone approved to a better-ranked nearby public elementary school, but I was denied. While our school does have some excellent individual teachers for which we are very grateful, it has some serious problems and is not suited to her diverse educational needs. Why should she be stuck there? Our hard-earned tax dollars are funding a standalone gifted school she can't attend, and we cannot attend other public schools in Virginia Beach. We absolutely should be able to let our tax dollars follow our child to the private school of her choice where she's offered admission. We currently have applications with private schools, but likely cannot afford full tuition. This bill, as Senator DeSteff said, will incentivize public schools to improve and compete, which will be to the benefit of all students in our state. In conclusion, school choice is a win-win. It forces schools to improve and allows for our youth to be given the best possible educational opportunities. I cannot think of anything more important to the future of Virginia. We urge your support. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Barnes, a registered Democrat. I support this bill because I believe all parents in Virginia deserve a choice. If you live in a school district where the school is not meeting your kid's needs, you deserve a choice to send that kid somewhere else, and I believe the government should allocate those funds to help you do that. In many of these schools, the education that these kids are receiving, especially in the poorer urban neighborhoods, are not meeting the standards, and these kids are falling behind. Meanwhile, kids in other districts where the schools are receiving more funding are excelling. We would like to send some of these kids to private school where they can excel as well, and we believe that this bill will help pay for that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman and committee, my name is Craig DeSessa. I'm with the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance, and we support Senator DeSessa's bill because we believe parents need to have the opportunity to choose the best education for their child, and we think this bill will help that. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, appreciate you taking up this bill. I'm with Americans for Prosperity, Ben Knotts. We approve of this bill. One of the things we just want you to think about real quick is the status quo with kids who are likely to disenroll from the public school system. In the present formula that we have, if a kid disenrolls, the school locality basically loses a lot of that money. Our bill says that the locality keeps most of that money, and a small portion of it goes to the child so that they can pursue the education programs that will help them the most. And so this is a better deal from our view, and it helps you and helps improve the school system by lowering class sizes, but not at the detriment of the cost of the school system. And I get frustrated when my friends will say, oh, you're defunding schools, because this isn't what it does. With the status quo, when a child disenrolls, they lose money. So that's what we're trying to do here, is a win-win situation, and we hope you'll consider this bill. And if you have friendly amendments, we would welcome them for the outcome that we're trying to pursue. But we appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I am Melody Clark, speaking on behalf of Virginia Institute Action, and as a Virginian and a grandparent, we do support this bill. Thank you.
Is there anybody that would like to speak in opposition to this bill? Come on up.
Again, Ann Tatus, and I am a conservative who opposes this bill because, yet again, we're leaving out private and homeschooling. And the presumption, and I heard it in here, is it's rich kids who don't need any more money. Okay, my husband came home after 4 pumps in Afghanistan. He works 80 hours a week at Honeywell, so that what used to be Honeywell now is Advancix at a chemical plant. I do this 16 hours a day for free. And we had to pull our children from Chesterfield County because they were teaching my sixth grader drugs, to go home and look for drugs. Some of you may remember that from last year in the Senate Sub-Ed Committee. They were teaching her about general anxiety disorder, suicide. I had to pull her, and I refused to put my kindergartner in there. And so the assumption that people who have children we barely get by the skin of our teeth. We are poor. And we have to make it work to keep our children safe. But another thing is that I heard is that we have to start somewhere. We'll go back to it later and fix it later. Never in education policy history has a bill passed that anybody has ever gone back through and fixed later. So I don't want to hear that anymore. Thank you.
Afternoon, Chad Stewart with the Virginia Education Association. We oppose this bill and all the neo-voucher bills that are being proposed today. This bill is not like charters, and we just want to clarify that. This is very different. There's not mixed outcomes when it comes to voucher programs across the country. Every state longitudinal study that we have right now shows that students that switch to these programs using vouchers, on average, do not just a little worse, but significantly worse in predictive outcomes. Conservative think tanks that have long championed these types of programs, American Enterprise Institute, Heritage Foundation, have shifted positions over the past few years. no longer defending that you would expect students to have better outcomes from switching to these programs, at least academically, instead shifting to they're good for choice's sake. That shouldn't be good enough for Virginia students. We should not be supporting policy that will so predictably likely hurt student outcomes. We ask you to join us and oppose this bill today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It is so rare that I'm in agreement with my neighbor from Chesterfield that it really should mean something to folks. I firmly believe that public dollars belong in public institutions. If I have a private club membership, that doesn't mean I should be giving back a voucher for the tax money I pay for clubs. If I have a gun permit, that doesn't mean I should get back the money I get for law enforcement. And if I can afford private school, that doesn't mean I should get back the money I've paid into taxes to provide for an education system for our entire society. Now, let me ask you this question, because it talks about percentage, and I'm not a great person with math and lists, a percentage of the money that would have been allocated for the student. And let's take that, whatever that amount will be, and let me ask you this. Is it going to be equal to $24,455 per year? I'm a graduate of Paul VI High School, and the non-Catholic first student rate is $24,455 per year. To get the education I got, that's what it costs. That's the non-Catholic rate, because let me remind you, private schools under this system are still free to discriminate, and they have a much lower Catholic rate. These voucher programs allow public money to go to private institutions that are free of a lot of the constraints put upon our own public schools about who can and cannot be educated. When you use these voucher programs, you're taking money from the people who need it and giving coupons to the people who don't. Because, as Ann had pointed out, this is not enough to cover someone's full bill. And even if it was, you should not be able to just walk away from your responsibility as a citizen to educate the people of this country. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. Stacey Haney on behalf of the Virginia School Boards Association. We have a long-standing position in opposition to these voucher programs, education savings accounts. In addition to some of the reasons that you already heard, these programs siphon money away from public schools, and we believe that the money should stay in the public schools. We ask that you not advance legislation.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Tom Smith, the Superintendent Association. Along with Haiti, we've had a long-standing position against vouchers, against savings accounts. I think I've mentioned on another bill, I've been doing this for 13 years, and I think I've come here and talked about this for at least the majority of those years. So we'd ask that you not approve the bill. Thank you.
Good to see you, Tom. Good.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. Jeremy Bennett representing the Virginia Association of Counties, VACO. And with respect to the patron, we also have a long-standing position about diversion of public funds from public schools. So we have to oppose the bill.
Afternoon, Josette Boliva with the Virginia Municipal League. In order to be brief, we also have the same longstanding position as everybody else, not diverting any public funds. So we do oppose and appreciate the patron's intent. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking. Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to just kind of wrap it up for a minute. And I looked into this before I decided to carry this bill. And the reason I looked into this is because I had heard so many stories on one side and the other. So I visited a couple of locations in Pennsylvania. Both Pennsylvania, Arkansas, Texas, and a bunch of other states have ESAs. And when I went there, I had talked to a couple of parents who had very challenging upbringing, and they were at the lower socioeconomic class when it came to their children. So I went and talked to some of the poorest parents who had the opportunity to pull their children out of school, decide what school their children went to, and their children will be some of the first children this is generational, that have now gone to college and succeeded in life. One of the ladies I talked to, she was able to put her child into a private school all the way up. She got a full scholarship to college. She went to med school on a full scholarship and is going through her residency now. So this lady, who couldn't rub two nickels together when we started this, saw that this was an opportunity to take a child and provide a difference. What this does is provide educational equity for those who cannot afford it. It provides a path forward for those who can't afford it. It provides an equalization for every child out there across the board, regardless of socioeconomic status. Further, what it does is it provides an incentive to our public education system to improve and compete across the board. This is an opportunity for our education systems, for our schools to stand up, do better, and incentivizes them to compete across the board with private schools and every other opportunity out there. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Don't you put that on
Almost
me.
had you.
Don't you put that
Lieutenant
on me.
Governor already.
That sounds awful.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Pekarsky.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to make a few comments. I will not be supporting this bill. I don't believe you take out public funds from public schools. And in fact, just to your comments right at the end about this being the path forward to make sure that public schools do better, get better. We just recently had a JLARC study that said our public schools are underfunded considerably. I think if we'd like to see our public schools be able to do more, they educate all children, unlike many of these private institutions. I would say maybe we need to focus our efforts maybe on realizing some of those recommendations at this point in time. But I thank you, and I appreciate you being here today.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Senator, please.
Senator Pekarsky, if I may. While I was in Pennsylvania, I actually went through statistics for 3 different schools there, and what they found was that this actually provided better scores, better results for the children after they had lost a small, very, very small percentage of the children to other schools. What they did was took a step back, evaluated what they were doing, and they were incentivized to do better for all children who were there. So their scores on reading, writing, math, and everything else went up significantly. And I went to some of the poorest schools in Pennsylvania when I went and did the tour to do this. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Peake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, Senator DeSteph, thank you for bringing this bill. And I've been on this subcommittee for a while in education for 8 years now, and we talk about schools, and I just think that at some point we're going to have to try something different. You go back 30 years, 40 years, we talk about failing inner city schools, and yet we really don't try anything that different. Increase teacher pay, more spending per pupil, but we really don't talk about doing anything different in our education system. And this gives parents an opportunity, and I prefer, thank you for bringing this, Senator DeSteph, I prefer a bill that was brought years back by Senator Obenchain, which had an income limit in it, and I know Senator DeSteph would accept that limit if we could actually get this through, but we're not going to get this through. But it had an income limit. So you had to be below a certain income level so that this type of bill, education savings account, applied to our lower income people who were trapped in failing schools. And then they could take that money and give their kids an opportunity, like Senator Steph was talking about what happened in Pennsylvania. And then that creates some competition, and competition's always good.
I guess I'll round it out in saying, if I thought that this worked and did the things that people say it would do, I would be supportive. I don't think it does. but I'm not gonna kind of go down that path. Instead, I'm going to renew a plea that I've said in the House before, back when I was in the lesser body, which is to say that I think there's this kind of misconception, and I'm not accusing you of it because you didn't make it, but there's this misconception that there's school choice or there's one way in the public school. And I think actually in public education, if you're doing it right, you can have a lot of dynamic choices that are built within that model that I think we could find some bipartisan support on. And there's a lot of different pathways for that: magnet schools, governor schools, dare I say lab schools, where we can CTE schools, where we can find that path, and that would be the preferred method that I would have to continue to create those different pathways for students with different needs. But with that, I guess the committee works on motions. There's been a motion and a second to report Senate Bill 558. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Nay.
Ayes 2, noes 3.
That bill recommends the recommendation to report fails on a vote of 2 to 3. Thank you, Senator DeSalle.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much. And what I'll do after session, when we finish these 60 days, I'll provide you with a couple of school districts to talk to where you can see where it actually changed the outcome for a lot of children from what they did 5-10 years ago to today, where those schools that were their failing schools that had almost a 0% of the children going to college, now they've switched, and it's truly taken some of these inner city schools and flipped it around. So I would recommend 2-day tour doing that. There's some good restaurants up there as well. But thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. Really appreciate your indulgence today.
Thank you. Next up, we have Senator Jordan, who's got Senate Bill 533.
Yes, sir. Let me know whenever you're ready.
Go for it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I spent a little bit of time over the last couple of years listening, actually, and boy, do I have a bill for you. Late in the day, we need a little bit of a laughter there. So what Senate Bill 533 is actually called Education Excellence for All. I've heard a lot of what so many people have said in this room and how they're concerned about public school funds being diverted, and I hear that. And so this bill actually doesn't do this. It's actually an additional $2 million pot that would be an option for people to exercise. What this bill also does is it provides an opportunity and pathway for families that are below the federal poverty level between 300% for everyday school children, and then up to 400% for those with IEPs. The difficulty that we really had, and especially post-COVID, I wish I could have printed a handout in time for all of you, but about an hour ago, the Weldon Cooper Center at UVA just put out a report, and it showed the decline in schools from COVID going forward. And in rural and urban areas, it was at least 3%, and in many places over 6% across the Commonwealth, which equates to about a 40,000 student loss. When schools were closed and doors were shut, a lot of parents didn't have a choice, especially when their children needed additional opportunities for schooling, to be able to find other methods and avenues. And a lot of those parents left public school systems for private opportunities, whether it was pre-K, K, or K through 12. And I'm sure that all of us would like to see those kids back in the public school classroom. I hope that I would find some agreement in that, if those parents so choose. The hardship is that opportunities such as education excellence would truly allow parents with children that need additional tutoring, therapies, anything for remedial literacy and learning, can access a small pot of money each year to be able to enhance their children's education. And I think that any parent would agree with wanting to enhance their children's education. Now, I'm certain there will be a long line of people behind me, maybe in opposition. And so if our intention here is to hope that we find opportunities, especially in areas where we're not meeting or filling SEQ positions for literacy or reading specialists, or families that have children with disabilities or IEPs that we need to fulfill and help, I might want to offer an amendment for this committee. And I think that probably council could offer that if you all had any interest to do that. On 145 and 146, where we could hopefully make it optional for school districts if school boards wanted to vote and opt into such an opportunity. But again, this does not divert local money. This would be an additional pot of money for families to be able to access in order to provide their children with opportunity, whether it be tuition, therapy, additional remedial training, or services that will meet and exceed the needs of each and every child in Virginia. If the committee has any questions, I'd be glad to take.
All right, we can do testimony. We're going to limit it to 5 minutes because this is pretty similar. And if you are giving testimony, speak to the differences between the bills because there are differences.
Mr. Chair, I would disagree,
You disagree.
With that assertion, and I don't want that to stink on my bill.
If you're coming up to speak to the differences. So if you're for the bill, kind of come on up. We'll do 5 minutes.
My name is Ashley Barnes, and I support this bill. The kids with the lower income requirements, those are the kids the most at risk, the kids who are in the worst schools and the worst situations at home and would benefit the most from an opportunity to go to a private school with the assistance from the government.
Good afternoon. My husband and I have 4 boys. We're active in our local school systems. We have boys in both public and private school. Parents like myself who are tax-paying citizens would greatly benefit from a portion of our tax dollars to help our own students. And I would humbly ask the members of the committee today who came here thinking that you would vote no, just pause and ask yourself why. Regardless of party affiliation or personal perspectives, we all agree that Virginians deserve every possible option to have the best education possible. This bill is one more avenue to provide such opportunities, and I would ask you to vote in favor of it. Thank you.
Natalie Erdesy, I'm speaking on behalf of Moms for Liberty Virginia Legislative Committee in support of Senate Bill 533. As a parental rights-focused organization, we endorse this bill, and we ask that its bipartisan, broad-reaching, and income-limited benefits receive your support as well. Please consider all families across Virginia who desperately want something better for their children. You can give them that and help both Virginia families and schools thrive. Thank you.
Good afternoon, President and Chair. My name is Michael Bailey. I'm a coach, education coach now. I used to coach in athletics. I've been here before. I spoke a year ago in favor and support of this bill. I represent families and students that are below the poverty level at 100%, 200%, and 300%. They have a voice today. I represent them. What I heard today is we need to do something new. What I also heard today is that, excuse me, we need to compete. You're talking to a coach. We have to fight to compete for families that simply can't compete, and they don't have an option to compete. Public schools, yes, I'm a product of it. Private school, I was recruited. I did not go. Charter and all of the schools, at the end of the day, I want Virginia to concentrate on the word education. I want Virginia to concentrate on the word education. Take the colors out of it. Education is systematic instruction to win. We know the Super Bowl is going to happen every year. That's also systematic instruction to win. Last year when I spoke, you spoke to the point where you said, we don't want to support this bill, but we're open to suggestions. We're going to say that again next year if we don't do anything about it this year. Why are we afraid to compete? Let the data be the data. I work at Martin Luther King Middle School. I represent the 6th district, but more importantly, I represent 40 years of pre-K through 12 education as a 5th grade teacher, an athletic administrator.
There's only about a minute left for those.
I'm going to let them go. Virginia, today is the day to act now and change education around the world. We have enough headlines that say that we have an FD grade. I know you want to win. I know you want to compete, and I know you want to help families that live below the poverty line at 100 and 200 and 300%. Those are real numbers. And I ask that you support this bill and give these families the opportunity to send their kids to a school that offers higher, optimistic people engagement. That's what poor people don't have. Optimistic people fighting for them. Thank you.
My name is Philip Thompson. I've been on the NAACP. I've been an NAACP president. I've been on both the NAACP and ACLU board. I have to agree with what Senator Peake said. We got to do something different here. I know that interest groups are giving out money and doing all these things for both sides. Look, I'm a lobbyist. I do the same thing. But you got to start looking at the kids. And if we don't pay attention to the kids, we're going to be in trouble. Thank you.
Again, I'm Craig DeSessa with the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance. I agree completely that we need to do something different. If you get all the money you need that they're asking for in the public schools, how long is that going to take to get the kids that are in the system now? It's not. We're going to lose all of those children. I worked with 5 10-year-old boys from Richmond recently. 4 could not read, and they could not write their name legibly. We know the stats. What's going to happen with those boys? If you don't invest in this, you're going to need to invest in more prisons and more funeral homes. Thank you.
Ben Knotts with Americans for Prosperity, Mr. Chairman. We support the bill, and we support it strongly. I heard people say last year, or with the other ESA bills, they say, oh, this is for the rich kids who can already afford this. This is not. This is for kids that really don't have any options or choices. So I ask in your hearts, if you think they need an option, then figure out how to amend the bill in such a way that you can improve it or you can get there. But it is not, the status quo's got to go. So I'm asking you in your heart to please figure out some way to find language that we can get along with, that these kids aren't stuck with the status quo. And I hope you'll take a look at that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Melody Clark, Virginia Institute Action, again a Virginian and still a grandparent. You do have the opportunity here to support underserved communities and also increase the education opportunities for all students across Virginia by allowing the possibility of these smaller, more focused outcome-based classrooms. This is a win for students, teachers, and especially also the legislators. Please support this. We do need to do something different. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tyler Turner. The reason to support this bill and difference is for people 300% under the poverty line. They do not have any other choices, and they do not have any other opportunities. The right thing to do is to allow more opportunities and choices for people in a predicament that they otherwise cannot get out of. I support this bill.
May I speak? I'm going to speak to 2 differences in the bill. When I prepared my remarks, which I won't go into in detail, I reflected back on the Education Committee last year. Then Delegate Van Valkenburg said exactly what he said today. He would support the bill if he thought ESAs provided positive outcomes. Another delegate argued what was argued here. You'd lose funding from the schools, and they needed to be funded first, but you never say how much it really requires. So here are your points of reference. I went back and I did my homework, and over the period 2009 to about 2016, Dr. Greg Forrester went and looked at 100 studies that had been done on school choice from 1998 up until whatever date he wrote the book. And in that, they measured several things. The effect of school choice on, let's see here. I want to list these. Student academic outcomes. These are participant outcomes. Public school academic performance. Reduced costs to taxpayers. School racial desegregation and civic values and practices. It included the studies that you mentioned last year. The one in Louisiana, and a couple of others. Well, what did they find? Out of 100 studies, these were statistically valid studies that either had actual statistics around them or had longitudinal data. 87 demonstrated positive effects in all 5 measures, 10 demonstrated no visible effects, and 3 demonstrated a negative effects. We only focus on the negative effects. And last, on the funding, this bill is different than withdrawing a student from public school. When you do that, you lose all per pupil education funds to the school system. This bill takes 1/3 of the per pupil expenditure and gives it or funds the ESA. The child remains in ADM. The money is budgeted, appropriated, and allocated in the next year, over the next years he's in there, and the remaining 2/3 remains in the public school system to fund fixed cost and other things. So instead of losing, let's say, $75 million, you decrease that amount by $50 million that's in the school system. So my last comment here is student-to-teacher ratio goes down, per pupil expenditure for the remaining public school students goes up, and low-income, at-risk parents are no longer limited to the public school to which they've been assigned by a zip code. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, before you take opposition, just some of the last stated facts don't apply to my bill, and I believe they've applied to previous bills, and I just want to state that for the committee. Thank you.
Yeah. Opposition, if you're opposed to the bill, 5 minutes, we're sticking to it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Stacey Haney with the Virginia School Board Association. As with the prior bill, we have a longstanding position against these types of bills, and this legislation does siphon money away from public education. Lines 141, 142 provides that the state share of the SOQ and sales tax funding go to this account. Local funds don't go to the account, but as I'm sure, Mr. Chairman, you know, if a student goes out of the public schools, it goes somewhere else, the school division doesn't get the local per pupil funding for that student. So we lose all the funding for those students, and for those reasons, we oppose the legislation.
Chad Stewart with the Virginia Education Association. We agree, regardless of the source of the funding, we know that the budget general funds are fungible and could be going to public schools, which desperately need the additional funding, as we know very well from the recent JLARC report this summer. We also note that schools that are not fully accredited in the state of Virginia, that's those schools that haven't met full accreditation status, have never received more funding per student than our fully accredited schools. It's upside down from what we all know is needed. It would be truly innovative if we started funding our schools that are not fully accredited more than we fund our fully accredited schools. Same with getting to the national teacher pay average. Has never happened. We came closest in 1989. We've always hovered below it. We're going in the wrong direction for teacher vacancies. Most states are getting better. We've hovered at the same very high rate over the past 2 years. We know that this funding is desperately needed for public schools, and that's where it should stay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as member of the subcommittee, Tom Smith, Superintendent Associate, I just want to associate my remarks with that of Ms. Haney, and we're opposed.
Again, Ann Tatus, and I am going to speak for a bill shortly. I wasn't expecting to speak on this one, but I kept hearing Senator Peake say, let's do something different. And I kept being like, okay. And then he would talk about leaving public school. My children are in private because I can't put them in public. I want them to be in public. The truth is that there are not enough privates that are safe, or the reasons that people, but also the fact that they're all using the standards of learning, which is why our publics are failing in the first place. Children that are leaving public school are 2 years behind. What would that look like for a historically marginalized or a child with poverty when they are going into a private 2 years behind? If you're not aware of this, in 2015, they reappropriated Title I and IDEA to make all children at risk. So I invite people to have conversations with people like me so that we can look and see where the money is actually going. So it's IDEA and Title I, and that would be McKinney veto, the homeless, is all being misappropriated to go to things like social emotional learning. We're the only state remaining where all of our funding goes through the Board of Supervisors before it actually gets to the school board. How about let's stop that so that the money doesn't get reappropriated by the boards of supervisors and actually goes to the school boards. We are 50th in the nation for 4th and 8th grade literacy. 4th grade literacy is how prison matriculation is done, so I hope that people will stop looking at me and thinking that I am racist and when I have certain views. But the SOLs, in 2009, Bob McDonnell said, we stopped grade level competency and went to college and career readiness. And in that time, we became the only state below proficient on the NAEP scores. So really, we can fix public schools, and when you talk about let's do something different, let's do something different, but it doesn't mean leaving.
Hi, Josette Boulevard, Virginia Municipal League. Again, longstanding position of opposing any bills that divert public funding. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Jeremy Bennett, Virginia Association of Counties, VACO. Associate my remarks with Ms. Boulevard.
Senator Craig.
Thank you. And I want to thank the patron for putting this bill in. I served on the school board for 12 and a half years, and I served during COVID. And we truly failed our children during those years. And it wasn't the children that parents could afford to send them to private school or send them and get special tutoring. It was the kids that couldn't afford it. And so it's going to be almost impossible for them to catch up if we don't do something different. So thank you, Senator Jordan, for putting this bill forth. I support the bill.
There's been a motion and a second to report Senate Bill 533. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
No. Ayes 2, noes 3.
The motion to recommend to report fails 2-3. Thank you. Senator Sturdivant, you have 2 bills, so pick your poison.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not quite sure how my bills got on this particular docket today. They may be next week's subcommittee meeting that they're supposed to be on, but Mr. Chairman, these are our different bills. The first one, if it's all right to go in numerical order, is Senate Bill 380-380. When I was previously in the Senate, I carried a bill with Delegate Bourne, I believe it was, and it was to create an apprenticeship program, and we did it as a pilot for Richmond City Public Schools to help create vocational workforce training opportunities for high school juniors and seniors. The idea being that we would pair up kids that were soon to be going into the workforce as opposed to college with actual jobs that could turn into real jobs after graduating. And one of the challenges that I know all of you know, Senator Peake has been around here a while, but for those of us in the freshman caucus, when you do bills like that and it goes to finance, it's always a challenge finding that money to support the thing that you care about. And so I wanted to find a way where we could avoid those issues of getting what you care about into the budget, but still creating opportunities for young Virginians to have a more dynamic, diverse public education. I think that's why this bill is different than I think some of what you've heard today, at least while I've been sitting here, is this is a bill that directly supports and promotes our public schools by allowing individual school boards to make the right decisions for their school district, to use some of their per pupil funding to provide offerings that would otherwise not be available to the kids in that school district. And so one of the things that is in this bill that's especially important to me is, again, creating those internships, apprenticeships that I think for
all of us who have been around this for a while, the ability for us to create something like that at the General Assembly level, an apprenticeship program, and have it implemented and funded is not a small task. And this helps to sort of push that out to the individual school systems to create whatever the right apprenticeship or internship would be for their individual school district. So what works in Southwest will be different than what works in Northern Virginia, but the idea is you're leaving it in the hands of those individual school boards to come up with those alternative education options that are right for the kids in those areas. So, this is not a bill that creates a separate account for anybody. It's not a bill that's taking kids out of public schools. To Mr. Chairman, your point earlier, a couple of bills ago, you were talking about bipartisan efforts for these sort of dynamic and diverse ways of educating kids, and that's really the vein that this bill is trying to provide those tools to our school systems. Because having served on a school board myself, if you want to create a program like that at the school board level, you got to go find the money somewhere, which is not easy. And so what this bill kind of does is it helps, again, create those opportunities. And so that's sort of the win-win here. It's for those of us in the freshman class this year, it's not something that would have to go to finance. And for those who have objections to money getting put in, the education savings accounts, this doesn't do that either. Keeps the kids in the public schools. And I think, quite frankly, would make these public schools that have these offerings more attractive to a lot of families. If you know that if I send my child to that particular city or county public school, they're going to be able to do the Amazon externship or the Newport News shipbuilding apprenticeship. And that's really where the idea came from for Delegate Bourne and I, was we toured the Newport News shipyard, and they have their own sort of junior college training facility at the shipyard that's like the preeminent training facility in the nation. And so we wanted to try to create something similar like that. So that's this bill, and be happy to answer any questions.
Before we take testimony, I'm not unsympathetic to the idea. I guess I have three questions myself. Question one is, how would this interact with, because I don't see guardrails on it, and maybe I'm just not looking at it correctly. How would this interact with like your kind of diploma path, right? So you're Johnny and you're getting a regular diploma and you're trying to implement some of this. Like, how is that? Does that make sense? Like, how is that? You got to take however many classes.
Yes.
And maybe the answer is it's not, because you can do some of this stuff outside the school day, but I guess that's my first question.
On line 71, paragraph 4, each school board shall determine if an offering from an alternative educational program qualifies as an alternative means to earn class credit or fulfill one or more graduation requirements. So it delegates it to the school board to make that decision.
And then my second question is the definition of alternative educational opportunities feels really broad to me.
Sure.
Then this is just maybe my worldview. But when I read life skills instructional programming, a shiver goes down my spine.
I don't disagree with you. Mr. Chairman, if there are, it is broad. I don't disagree. If there are revisions that make it more palatable, I certainly would consider those friendly amendments.
Okay. And then my third question, because then I'll let people get in, is why do it this way, where you're saying we're going to capture this pot of money and we're going to do this, versus trying to integrate it on the the front end of how one goes about getting a diploma, right? So rather than say we're gonna put this pot of money, if you want to use it for these things, you can. Why not try to say we're going to create this more? Because we had this, and this is bills we had last week around CTE as well. Of if we want to do these other pathways to get to certain diplomas, we want to kind of broaden out what it means to get those diplomas. Does that make sense?
I think so, and I think part of that, if I'm understanding your question correctly, was sort of, you know, the example I used of us having to go to finance and try to get money for something is that's just it's a heavy lift for in many cases. And so this again is sort of it's the pot of money is going to be there already, and if the SOQ changes this year past, it's going to be an even larger pot of money, and this is sort of just delegating it to the school board to.
Yeah, well, I guess fourth question, and then I'm going to stop, I swear, but wouldn't it have to go to finance? Because you'd be saying, I mean, I don't think any of us would know what the amount of money is that comes out of a school budget, but if 100% of kids, which wouldn't happen, but like if 100% of kids took access to this money, wouldn't that then drain the amount of money a school system has to pay for whatever they're paying for, teachers, support staff, infrastructure, whatever it is?
Well, I mean, it's not. It is not a something that is going to require an appropriation in the budget, and so I guess that's my thought as to why it would not have to go to finance.
People who support it want to come up, and we'll do 5 minutes because we're getting late in the day, and we're going to have to go to Senate Finance.
Mr. Chair, Benjamin Knotts with Americans for Prosperity. Just to briefly answer some of your questions, the intent is that when I work with the School Board Association, a number of things, two things they always say when we bring up education bills is make it permissive and make it flexible. And so what this does is it just creates a process so that they have this at play if they want to do this for, let's say, one specific child. That's the intent when we were working with legislative services to get that there. The intent is for them to have this process available so that they can innovate within their school system using their own funds, so to give them some flexibility, but they have full discretion, and that's the main point. They have full discretion. They can bring the hammer down on anything, any idea, but they have full discretion and flexibility, and that shouldn't have a fiscal impact because they might not do anything at all, but they have the option. That's the point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chris Allen, Middle Resolution Policy Network. We support the bill.
Natalie Erdesy, Fauquier County, mother of four, speaking in support of SB 380. There's no body more well-versed in the options and needs of local families for choice in education than the local school boards. They know the hardships, they know the community, they know the families who need something different, and would see the direct impact of increased educational access within their own neighborhoods. They are also the most accessible governing body we have for families to advocate for themselves and their children's needs. Please support local governance and decision-making with SB 380. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tyler Turner from Lynchburg. I recently spoke at the Lynchburg School Board, and to the bill of Senator Sturdivant, the overwhelming majority of the board agreed that local school choice options or alternatives should be on the table. The reality is our families are wanting more options and more opportunities for their children in their communities. Therefore, each community and each local charter should have the sovereignty and the authority to be able to adopt a program if they see necessary. One-size-fits-all approach does not necessarily mean it for every community and every local charter and county. I urge you to support this bill.
Mr. Chairman, Todd Gackey on behalf of the Family Foundation, we support the bill.
Those in opposition?
Again, Ann Tatus, sorry, I do education policy, so all of this is that I'm confused because we already have lab schools, which is what this is. And that's my senator in Chesterfield, and We have so much workforce training. Has anybody ever stopped to think what the purpose of education is? It is not to get a job. It is to make a living, make a life, and have a foundation of academics and knowledge so that you can then do anything that you want to do. So we give these kids a skill. In 10 years, they're tired of the skill. How many jobs have you guys had? Have you had your one your entire life? Is that we've already got so much workforce. You've got so lab schools, and then I hear Americans for Prosperity talk about choice, school choice. How did this become school choice? Because the governor talks about lab schools being school choice. Is that when are we going to talk about academics, math? Can teach these kids how to do math so that they can then, if they're impoverished, they can then go and become astrophysicists and do anything they want, not have one skill the rest of their lives. That's not the purpose of education.
Mr. Chairman, Stacey Haney on behalf of the Virginia School Boards Association. While this looks a little different than the prior bills, we oppose it for the same reasons. And I just, in response to what one of the speakers in support said, I just wanted to point out that it's not permissive. Line 47, each school board shall create a process. And so we oppose this legislation for the reason we oppose the other voucher type programs.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Tom Smith, the Superintendent's Association. The way I read the bill, school divisions are required to set a certain amount of money over in a separate pot for all debt. And then the child can do that for whatever they feel that's important to them. Regardless of what the total plan for the system is, regardless of what the alt-ed system is set, for those reasons, it is like a voucher. And so we would oppose it. Thank you.
Chad Stewart with the Virginia Education Association. I would associate our comments with the previous two speakers and also note that it should not be left up to every school board in the state to decide which coaching or life skills course should stand in place for a graduation requirement. That is the duty of our Virginia Board of Education, and this bill would certainly move that standard and power. Thank you.
You want the last word?
No, just ask that the committee recommend the reporting of the bill, please.
There's been a motion and a second to report Senate Bill 380. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No.
Ayes 2, noes 3.
The motion to recommend a report fails 2-3. Let's take up 421.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Senate Bill 421 is a foster child scholarship program. If you heard Senator Reeves on the floor of the Senate earlier today during personal privilege, he noted that there are right around 5,000 kids in foster care in Virginia. A significant portion of them are in foster care because their biological parents had fentanyl-related issues. And so, we talk about the challenges that foster kids face, being moved around, being separated from their parents. One of the things that obviously they also undergo is having to move around from school to school to school, depending on where they are and who they're living with. And so it's, as I understand it, it's presently Virginia law that a foster child, a child in foster care can stay in their school in their own district, but that doesn't always address every individual situation that a foster child might be going through. And so essentially what this bill does is allows the foster child's caregiver, the foster parents, if you will, the ability to choose the school of their choice, the right school for that foster child, and candidly, whether public or private, and whether it's in a neighboring school district or in their own school district. It would give them the freedom of choice to be able to choose the right school for that particular child. And I know that there's objection from various groups, and I've heard the comments of the members of this committee. And I would just say that this is a unique demographic, a unique population that already have an enormous amount stacked against them, being in the foster system. And this is one small way that we can give them a little bit of more opportunity in a situation where they have a lot of opportunities taken away from them. That again is limited to a pretty finite, small population. Okay, this is not some of the bills that you've heard today that are looking to offer, education savings accounts or use the terminology that you wish all over the Commonwealth or for any family at all, regardless of their socioeconomic status. This is limited to just a very disenfranchised, very challenged demographic of foster kids. And so that's the bill, is to allow them to have that freedom of choice in their education, or at least their caregivers to make that choice.
Senator Peak.
That we've been working to address. We were so far behind. I've not seen a proposal like this before, so it's very unique. And like it is, has it been used in any other state, or are you aware of it being used anywhere else?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Peak, I am not. I've carried various bills like this over the years. I know what the committee makeup is going to be, after November's elections, and I know how these are often received. And I know that we've also had a lot of challenges with our foster care system and the difficulties that foster kids go through. And I wanted to bring this forward as potentially a bipartisan way that we can at least help address the significant challenges of this finite population of young people, to at least try to give them some additional options.
Mr. Chair. So you've been on the school board, you've been in the Senate, you've been on education committees. So this is based on things you have observed personally that you think would benefit that population.
I think if you know anything about families who have been involved in foster care, the kids who are going through foster care, the fact that every year that goes by, it becomes more difficult for those kids to get adopted, and they're, in many cases having to bounce around from home to home to home in various different places. For a school-age child, which all foster kids are, obviously, that also means a lot of displacement when it comes to their education. And so that this is a way to help at least provide some additional stability in their lives in otherwise unstable conditions.
Thank you.
Let's take testimony from people in support.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I actually take a real unique interest in this bill because our family has been foster care parents. We've adopted through foster care. And there were many instances in which we would have a young student living with us, and they would be in another locale or attending school in another locality, and there would have to be transportation involved in order to get them to that school, to transport them. And in some cases, the caseworker would have to come and take time out of their day. And it would have been a lot easier had they been able to go to school with our kids, or allow us to be able to take them to school, drive them there. I think this is a really inventive way to address a specific problem. We heard today on the floor, as it was mentioned, I'll reiterate, 4,000 or more kids in foster care compared to 1.2 million, I believe, somewhere around in there. They're enrolled in school in Virginia. We're talking about a small population. The effort is to reduce the number of kids in foster care. So you would probably see, as the number of children go down in foster care, there would be less stress on a program like this. And it would help them find the school of their choice that best meets their education needs, maybe get them out of a school that is where there's a lot of crime. I think this is a very smart bill, and we support it.
I have a, oh, go ahead.
Ben Knotts, Americans with Prosperity. Mr. Chairman, just wanted to address that the good thing about this bill is it's about continuing education, which is something everybody's passionate about. So when the patron alerted us to it, that we were aligned with that, and we appreciate him for carrying the bill. Thank you.
Senator Craig.
Thank you. I have a quick question for the patron. So this bill, if you're a foster parent and you have a foster child in your home, and he was from Colonial Heights, but you live in Chesterfield, got a point, that he could either go to Colonial Heights or he could go to Chesterfield with you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it would give them the freedom to choose, yes.
But freedom to choose, like to go to Hanover, or just either where you live or where the child lived before?
It would give them the freedom to choose to go to the right school for that child. So
in the district? Or a private school?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Mr. Chairman.
Those in opposition.
Stacey Haney for the Virginia School Board Association. As I've said, we've had a long-standing position against voucher bills. That includes this one. We're not unsympathetic to the needs of children in foster care, but we already have a lot of provisions in the law that dictate how children in foster care are, how they're educated. And so there's a lot of protections already in the code for children in foster care. I'm not saying that those can't be improved, but we don't think this is the way to do it.
Ms. Haney. Mr. Chairman,
Senator
question.
Peake. Yep.
Ms. Haney, and for the folks coming up after, if we struck the language or private school, would you still object? So that the child could attend any school, such as the Senator Sturtevant, who might live in Chesterfield and or Colonial Heights, and could take the child to Colonial Heights or Chesterfield, or if he had other children.
I believe that there's already provisions in existing law that address that type of a situation. And so that would not remove our opposition. Thank you.
Well, is that, counsel, can you speak to that?
Yep. Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking to pull up the code section right now, but there is a provision in the code already that essentially provides for open enrollment. So for a foster child to attend a school division outside of their resident school division or the school division that they're eligible to attend based on their residence. It may, if I can find it, be, let's see. I apologize. So essentially it permits for foster children in the event that they might be switching their place of residence to have continuity in enrollment. So if they start out attending one school division and then due to a switch in placement or a switch in whoever has custody of them or their foster care placement, they would technically then reside in a different school division. They could continue to remain in that original school division. And that is what I am able to find right now, but I will yield and continue to look. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm short. Tom Smith Superintendent's Association, that's true. Having been through this as a superintendent, there are protections for continuing the child. This is a voucher. It's also good for private schools. It's also, schools like, and are we going to say that it's okay for them to go to any school in Virginia? And how is not just the one that's dealing with where they reside or where they've moved to, but Fluvanna, if they live in Colonial Heights. So, that's a concern of mine if we're going to open it up to all private schools, because superintendents have to be able to plan for attendance. But I've dealt with this before, and those are the protections that are in the code now. So we're against this as a voucher bill.
Chad Stewart with the Virginia Education Association. For similar reasons to the previous two speakers, we agree. And also, we would just note once again that overwhelmingly every longitudinal study we have on these types of voucher programs show that students do significantly worse. I know it was referenced earlier by opposition that there are hundreds of studies out there. Those hundreds of studies are mostly experimental with less than 100 student population count. The 5 longitudinal studies that we have at the state level have tens of thousands of people in the sample size, and the results for student outcomes are significantly worse than even the learning loss that we saw during COVID. So that's what we have to go back to continually for these types of voucher bills. We ask you to oppose the bill. Thank you.
Josette Bulova with the Virginia Municipal League. For all the reasons previously stated, we also oppose this bill. Thank you.
Senator?
I just ask the committee recommend reporting the bill, please.
I need to make a motion. All those, the motion is to recommend to report Senate Bill 421. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay.
Ayes 2, noes 3.
The motion to recommend to report fails 2-3.
Thank the subcommittee.
All right, before we get to the other senators here, we're going to do some real quick cleanup. So first, we are going to carry over to 2025 Senate Bill 170, which Senator Craig wanted to speak to that.
Yes, thank you. 170 is dealing with boys and girls clubs. We talked to the State Superintendent Coons. She has given us a letter, and they're going to work on it in the interim. The Boys and Girls Clubs will not be affected by this. If something does not go the way we would like, we will bring the bill back up next year. That's why we're just going to carry it over until 2025.
Is that a voice vote? Recorded vote, yeah. So the motion is to carry over Senate Bill 170. Is there a second? Second. All right, let's vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, that motion passes 5-0. The second thing we are going to do is we are going to pass by for the day Senate Bill 264, and anybody who has things that they would like to get to Senator Craig because they want to make changes should do that before the weekend so that we can have this ready to go for next week. Let's, can I get a motion to pass Senate Bill 264 by for the day? Second. There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. Next, Senator McGuire. Senator McGuire has Senate Bill 161, which we did talk about last week. Senator McGuire, I think we're going to go with send a letter to the board, but did you want to speak to it?
I'd like to, another offer of a work group, is that possible? And we also understand, just a reminder, Mac Baton and a bunch of people testified last week, it's identical to FOI's 139. And so if that's the only option, that's the only option.
Yeah, I've talked to people on the board, they're gonna, as they go through the accreditation process, they're going to take our letter from the chair, but they're going to incorporate this issue, which they tell me was on the agenda, and so we're going to see what they do, and then if we don't like it,
understood,
we're going to come back. So can I get a motion to pass by with the acknowledgement that the chair is going to write a letter to the Board of Education. All right, there's been a motion to pass by indefinitely, but to send a letter to the board from the chair. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes 4-0. And let's do the same thing with Senate Bill 139. So I can get a motion.
To pass by?
Yep. All right, there's been a motion and a second to pass by Senate Bill 139 and write a letter from the chair to the Board of Education. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you, sir. All right, that leaves us with one last bill. Senator Suderline. Let's talk some buses. Let's talk some buses. All right, Senator Suderline, go ahead and explain Senate Bill 431.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 431, which is before you, is a great opportunity, like you mentioned earlier, to increase opportunities for Virginia students in our public school system. What this seeks to do is increase the number of transportation solutions to expand learning opportunities inside school divisions right now. We want to make sure that we have more opportunities for our young people that might not just be at their one school, but might be provided at another school in their division or at an adjacent division or another institution of learning where they can participate in enrichment activities that best fit them, regardless of what transportation barriers they might have. And we seek to do this by expanding our public school division's capacity to utilize non-CDL required drivers for small fleet vehicles while still upholding the standard of care. And inside the bill, there's prescriptions for both making sure that we have proper drivers and also that the smaller fleet vehicles would be satisfactory to our standards. And it also goes through the process of the public approval process in each local school division should they choose to avail themselves of this. There's also a provision in here to enhance the data collection of this effort, and we believe that this is something that's a great opportunity for school children across Virginia and also their families, so that if their child might be in enrichment art or some other program at somewhere else across the school division, but that school division, like so many of ours, does not have the number of school bus drivers for the CDL drivers that they'd like to have, the school division is able to work with partners to get these children to these other institutions of learning and cultural enrichment activities without having to stress their parents as well. So you're going to hear, I believe, most everyone that's still in the room is interested in this bill. So you're going to get to hear from some folks, and you should also have letters and written testimony from the Virginia Community College System that would like to be one of the partners to work to have some of their constituent colleges become partners with some of the local public school divisions, and also a letter from the Chinese Parents Association of Northern Virginia that is especially interested in the potential to increase opportunities for the children that they serve.
Does anybody want to, let's take testimony first. Folks want to come up to testify in support of this bill? We're going to limit them to 60 seconds. We're sick of this. No, I'm kidding. I'm playing.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, I'm Kevin Bond.
Go ahead and put 10 minutes on there.
Mr. Chairman, Kevin Bodkin with the Virginia State Police, and we are in support of the bill.
And that's important because they would help facilitate what we allow.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Daniel Black, agriculture education teacher in Rockingham County, after-school program advisor. I have a Class B CDL, and I'm also a father. I rise in support of Senate Bill 431. Rockingham County is in a critical shortage of bus drivers, where we had 14 qualified drivers and 28 recruited positions in 2022 and 2023. The bus driver shortage has continued to grow since the pandemic. My students were directly impacted by that. If I wanted to take my students outside the classroom to learn through a field trip or other school activity, there were often no drivers or buses available. With that, I took it upon myself to get my commercial driver's license so my students would not miss out on opportunity for experiential learning due to a lack of qualified driver. Now, sometimes there are still buses that are not available for after school or field trips, which ultimately requires me to limit the space on a learning experience to whatever vehicle the county has available, or sometimes limited only to my own vehicle. Senate Bill 431 would allow our school system to have more flexibility to ensure that our rural county full of working class families like myself have access to more reliable, safe transportation options that puts our children first in and out of the classroom. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. I'm Savannah Goodwin, a past state FFA officer and national officer candidate for the Virginia FFA Association. I rise in support of Senate Bill 431 as a student who is extremely active in high school with many after-school activities, much occurring through the FFA. In Louisa County, our FFA advisor and agriculture teacher was dedicated to making sure that we never missed out on a personal and professional development activities through FFA. Whether she was reserving a school bus or a driver was taking us in her own vehicle with parental consent, transportation was always a challenge to make sure that no student was left behind. There are other models, such as carpools and electric vehicles, that are more economical and environmentally friendly my community could benefit from. The average school bus gets around 6 miles to the gallon, which is not always practical in rural communities like mine. We need permission to innovate. This bill provides school divisions with necessary flexibilities, need to ensure that students of all backgrounds and all activities have reliable, safe transportation. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the patron for leading this bill.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I am Dakota Stroud, middle school teacher in Shenandoah County, FFA advisor, and a CDL certified driver. I rise in support of Senate Bill 431. Shenandoah County is in a critical shortage of bus drivers, where we had just one qualified applicant per recruited position in 2022-2023. Additionally, we have no additional substitute drivers, to the point I drive substitute routes or extracurricular activities several times per month. This disparity can be addressed if we expand transportation options that are smaller and thus do not require full commercial driver's license status. This would ensure our students in rural areas, overcrowded urban areas, foster care, and those students that are participating in activities after school do not miss out on these opportunities that help shape my young impressionable students into confident, active high school students who then go on to pursue a career or higher education. Another example, my school solely will spend $18,000 on chartered buses to offer experiential learning opportunities to over 450 students this year, which is not covered by our division. Especially for my middle school students, it is crucial that they are in the classroom or participating in experiential learning activities and taking an active role in their education. Additionally, transportation options can help educators work to combat chronic absenteeism, as a lack of reliable transportation puts some kids at an automatic disadvantage, particularly children in rural areas. Children of working families and children of low-income families. We cannot afford for transit barriers to be the reason that our students are not in school learning or partaking in extra or intracurricular activities. As a 24-year-old Virginian driving a school bus to give students more opportunities, I encourage you to support this bill, and thank you for your time.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Kelsey Trainer Brown. And I'm here to speak today as a teacher, coach, and mom. And I support this bill. As a mom, before and after school is a crazy time. Dropping my son off and picking him up, getting him to his father, or bringing him along to my different school-related activities, making sure everyone is on time. This would be impossible without help or the means to drive. Unlike some of the others who have spoken today, I do not have my CDL license. And there are cases where I have tried to help by personally driving multiple students in my own car with parental consent. Because of that, I am now currently getting my CDL so that I can drive my students and players to both games and competitions around the state. We have to acknowledge buses work great for many students and will continue to, but they do not work for every student and family. I've seen it with my own kids, and I've seen it with the kids I teach. Allowing school divisions clear permission to expand additional Safe and reliable methods of transportation will ensure that before and after school is less hectic time for every mom. It will ensure that every student, regardless of family income, can engage in extracurriculars. That's why I support SB 431. It gives communities like mine clear permission to help every child and family by eliminating transportation barriers getting in the way of valuable learning time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Kyler Hedrick with Cozen O'Connor, representing the Boys and Girls Club of Virginia Alliance. And this program has worked in other states, has been successful, and is an innovative way to alleviate transportation issues for students. And for those reasons, we support the bill.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Emily Webb with the Virginia Chamber of Commerce. We are in support of Senator Suderline's legislation to provide divisions with alternative options for pupil transportation when transporting students to dual enrollment, CTE, and other similar programs. We believe it's important to provide equity of opportunity for students to participate in these programs no matter their socioeconomic status or their lack of personal transportation. Thank you.
AAP Virginia supports the bill.
So I'm trying to slip in between support and opposition. So there's a couple of concerns we have with the bill that I think are easily fixed that I don't think do harm to the intent of the bill, and that would get me from one category to the other. On lines 136 and 137, if the includes some shalls, and from the presentation of the bill, it sounded like the intent was for this to be an option for school boards, not a requirement that all school boards do it. So if those shalls became mays.
Can I pop in there real quick? And maybe this is for you, Senator. And then, because then Stacey, I want your opinion on it too. It seems to me that the bulk of the bill, the idea of the bill, is lines 47 to 50, 60, right? Where it's basically saying you have this alternative options for busing, right, for getting transportation. Is that right?
That's right.
Do we need everything else that's in it? Like, can we focus on that? I mean, I just from I know, but I know. That question's for the senator of can we boil it down to that one piece where we're giving them the option? And then my question to Stacey on top of that would be, is that kind of putting that bill in a posture where it's something you guys like?
Yes, because the reporting requirement was my other concern up in line 40.
I guess what I'm saying, Senator Suderline, is the bottom,
I think, Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yeah.
I think lines 82 going forward are pretty important.
Yes. Yeah.
And those are important for being able to actually conduct the earlier lines.
Yeah. So what if we got rid of lines 129 to 140, and we got rid of lines 26 to 30?
26 through 30.
Because 26 to 30 is just is kind of is forcing the reporting piece, and then the bottom has some. I think I agree with Stacey, has some additional stuff that's not kind of core to the idea of creating these pathways for the transportation. Would you be amenable to that?
Yes. I mean, what I most want to be able to do is to have the localities be able to do it.
Yeah.
I think there's value to having the reporting of, what the cost is, so that other school divisions can see, if they could pursue another path that might be more affordable. But that could be done other ways.
Could we start with, because this is something we always see on higher ed too, where it's all of a sudden there's 10,000 reports they're doing. Could we start with localities will send in what they have collected so that we can see what's what?
Yeah, that'd be great.
And then if we don't like,
I'm good with that.
And that could maybe be an enactment clause. An enactment clause? Do you see what I'm saying, Stacey?
If the reporting was for the school divisions that choose to participate in this, that would resolve my concern with it.
What do you think?
So have
I see what you're saying.
Have it be the
Yeah.
school divisions that choose to do this would share that information.
How does that? I think that makes sense.
That works.
Okay. All right, so we just did a lot of things. So council, what?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to read this back to make sure I have this all correct. But the amendment, which I believe would be done as an amendment in nature of a substitute, would effectively strike all of lines 26 through 30, or subsection D. It would strike all of lines 129 through 140, which would also result in that entire section 22.1-186 not having to be included. And then in terms of the reporting requirement, it would only apply to those schools which opted in to participate in this. And I was unclear as to whether you wanted to keep that, the intention was to keep that in the actual text of the bill, or move it into an enactment clause.
I'm agnostic on that. Do you want to just put it in the? What do you, council? What's your? What's your thought?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I believe that since section 22.1-176 is already being amended, it wouldn't do any harm to keep the reporting requirement in the actual text of the bill and just make it apply to only those school boards that participate.
Okay. Senator, is that?
Sounds good.
Okay. Senator Peake, sound good to you?
Sounds good to me.
Senator Pekarsky, sound good to you?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, then. Well, hold on, we got to move the amendments.
Move the amendment.
In the nature of a substitute, right?
In the nature of a substitute.
I need a second.
Tom? Second. Yeah.
All those in favor of the amendment in the nature of a substitute, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, that amendment in the nature of a substitute passes. Anybody want to comment on what we just did? It's good. My man. He gets the gold star today. All right.
Move to report as amended and substituted.
All right. The motion is to recommend to report the amendment in the nature of a substitute, Senate Bill 431. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right. That motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Senator Suderline.
Mr. Chairman and committee.
All right. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
The Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia.